What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a little news about Titan Quest 2, which is currently in early access as of just a couple months ago, back at the beginning of August. But we've already seen our first major update for the game, released yesterday from the time of this video, effectively adds Chapter 2 and also makes a few other changes I thought are worth talking about. Because as I mentioned with my initial video about this game's early access, I'm very interested in how it shapes up and plan on covering it the whole way through. But in particular, this update adds again a whole host of content via simply the addition of Chapter 2 itself, the unlocking of the 4th Mastery tier, changes to itemization, and of course the usual bug fixes and things you would expect of pretty much anything in early access. Keeping it simple though, let's first jump into the new zone and everything. So our new adventure, or the continuation of our regular adventure I suppose, brings us now to the northern beaches, which, as it would pretty much imply, is a coastal region filled to the brim with appropriately aquatically themed monsters, namely more of the Ichthyans, which we'll talk more about in just a moment. But as it just so happens, after you spend the first chapter tracking down the god Glaukos, he brings us here, which gives us our new goal of tracking down the nymph Scylla. But in order to do that, we have to naturally carve our way through all of the fish people, or the Ichthyans. We're going to do that with our new powers, of course, but probably worth a mention straight away that they have actually added some new enemy variants for even just the Ichthyans, as we have seen them in other places, but now you'll be seeing different variants of them as, of course, you take the fight to more of their sort of home turf, if you will. But it does go beyond just this one sort of faction, as there are going to be things like living statues, as you can see in the Morai Temple. They made a younger version of the Hippocampus, and they've even alluded to some other stranger finds you may just stumble across upon your adventures. And while that's all well and good in more real terms, this includes naturally main and more side quests alongside 9 different dungeons, a handful of uniques, and some changes to the items you'll be finding generally, which we're about to talk about. So all in all, should be a lot of new content for you, but probably worth a mention that this particular chapter serves as the sort of finale against the Ichthyans specifically, and the next time they go adding a zone and everything, it will actually be against an entirely new faction as the story, of course, continues to progress. But I mentioned that 4th Mastery tier. So if you're unaware, Titan Quest 2 uses a mastery system where you can mix and match some divine masteries, and as you perform various challenges and level up, you'll earn divinity to increase the tier of those that you are allowed to unlock. Well, they've unlocked the 4th Mastery tier for all the currently available masteries. They haven't added any new ones wholesale just yet. That should actually be the next update we wind up talking about. But basically all of the current masteries will have both new active and passive skills to go through. Like, for instance, Warfare gets a sword that will act as a buff before the end of that buff actually causes a big damage explosion, and then there's, of course, some passives that you'll be able to take advantage of. Whereas Earth gets things like Volcanic Eruption, which I would say is relatively self-explanatory, and then things like Stone Form, which will just make you straight up immune to damage for a period while being unable to move or anything. So basically, some new tools and stuff to mess around with. But a couple other things I thought worth mentioning there. They actually rebalanced the amount of divinity you needed for each tier because of the way things had been progressing, so it should actually require a little bit less divinity in order to get to that point. However, they have also moved the new temporary max level, which is currently level 45, so you'll likely have some more progression involving actually checking all of this stuff out for yourself. But it doesn't stop there, of course, because then there's the changes to itemization. Now, these changes would say are incremental. They're mostly working on things like balance while also increasing overall variety. And in fact, things like itemization and, the need to get that thing right in a game like this is the main reason they're in early access, so expect some further adjustments as things continue forward. But in the case of this particular update, what they focused on was adding more tiers to the affixes. Now, affixes already had tiers, they just have extra ones now, increasing basically the potential rolls you could get out of an item when it drops, potentially having more damage and stuff. And they also adjusted those to hopefully feel like bigger upgrades when you actually find a weapon, as as opposed to more incremental changes up to this point, which they are hoping, naturally, feels more rewarding. They also made a whole host of changes to how things drop and how things roll, in the sense that weapons are more inclined to things like attack speed, that kind of stuff, the stuff that is more generally helpful to a weapon, of course. On top of that, they also added some unique items, which obviously people will still have to find, but there are new uniques to be found with this update. And beyond that, they mostly just, of course, rebalanced some stuff and worked on bug fixes naturally. Now, in terms of what they rebalanced, when it comes to masteries specifically, it looks like Earth and Rogue were kind of where their attention was here in particular. They both got some buffs mostly, with Earth masteries rolling magma, dealing more damage and just generally being more useful, whereas Rogue's flicker ability got a very sizable buff actually, and hopefully is more useful to people now, so it can potentially see more use, of course. Basically everything else is the simple bug fixes and just random little stuff you would expect, fixing the occasional problem with certain masteries or abilities not doing what they are supposed to in certain situations, clarifying certain terms, things like that. The main thing I wanted to call out in this particular part before we wrap it up is that it looks like they have attempted at least to fix a save game issue that had been showing up in the previous version, that being that in certain situations you could potentially face a corrupted save file if there was a problem writing a save to your disk, which was, I would say, relatively rare in the grand scheme of things, but should hopefully help people out and obviously prevent that kind of thing from happening, which is frustrating to say the very least, so hopefully they've got that all sorted out. But I would say that's pretty much everything to know about this particular update as of today. So far, I think it's a pretty big step in the right direction. I'm glad to see it didn't take very long, as a matter of fact. But if I am being perfectly honest, the updates that I am more excited to see from them are the upcoming character creator to properly flesh out cosmetic character creation, and then they're going to follow that up with a new mastery, is my understanding, and it'll be fun to go over those when they drop. But for today, I think that's pretty much going to do it. Certainly hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. Let me know how you feel about this one down in the comments. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.